Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Before I get into this video's topic, I just want to thank you all so very much for helping me reach the 100,000 subscriber mark. It happened this week and I am very, very grateful for that. Thank you for your support and your comments, and hopefully I can keep on giving you content here on YouTube for a long, long time. So this video is something that I have been meaning to put together for a very long time because I keep getting kind of like the same questions quite often, and although I try to answer everyone individually, I thought it would be a good idea to have a video that I can refer them to. One of the questions that keep coming back is, what kind of paints do you recommend I should buy? What brand, what color, what sizes of brush, what tape do you use, and all that jazz. So what you're looking at is my quintessential tools. That's it. I use these on a daily basis, or every time I watercolor at least. So I'm going to start with the simple things and then I'll get into the specifics. First, I have two glass jars filled with water. One is for dirty and one is for clean. I also have a water mister bottle, and you don't need to have that bottle. I get this question a lot. It does spray a very fine mist, but this is actually a repurposed bottle. My friend Kathy gave it to me 2 summers ago and I keep using it, but there are many bottles you can get like that. I know Ranger Ink makes one that's pretty good. Then I have, obviously, I have a rag and I have a paper towel that rests on it. The reason why I have a rag is because that paper towel tends to get really, really wet, and so this will absorb a little bit of the excess. Then I have also tape, which I use when I tape my work to a piece of glass, and this also is a question. This is the tape that I started using recently and I absolutely love it. It's low tack and it's the FrogTape, and I get this at my local hardware store, and unfortunately it's yellow, but I've learned to live with this. I prefer a beigey or white tape, but I am willing to sacrifice the color because this one won't rip my paper as much. This also was a very, very big question. This was part of a cutting kit and I no longer have the accessories that came with it, but I kept the glass. Basically, it's just a piece of tempered glass. It's got a textured side and a smooth one. Obviously, I will glue my paper down onto the smooth surface, so in order to avoid any markings that might show through my paper. I've also found a bigger one because this one is kind of limiting. It's fine for 6x9 and smaller, but if you're painting bigger, you can go to anywhere where they would sell kitchen tools and appliances. I got a bigger one from Bed Bath & Beyond. It's actually a kitchen glass cutting mat, and I will show it to you. It's quite large and it's got like a heavily textured side, but the other side is smooth. And this is what I use. I use this side to tape my paper. It has those little feet, but it doesn't really bother me. Before I start discussing paper, I just want to mention that you don't have to break the bank to have decent tools for watercoloring. I don't want you to get that idea. You can get good quality for affordable price. I think when it comes to price or quantity, I would forego quantity and pay a little bit more to get quality. And that's always been my rule of thumb. I think this will make a difference, especially when you're just starting out, because bad paper, cheap paint, and cheap brushes can ruin your experience. There's a few things you need to remember about paper. You have paper that's made of cotton and you have paper that's made of cellulose or wood pulp. So these are the two main categories. And then within each you have cold press, hot press, different textures, different weight. The one thing I would caution you is to stay away from 90-pound weight paper. It's too thin, it will buckle, and you will probably lose your mind, especially if you're just starting. So I would recommend nothing lower than 140 pound or 300 grams. And as far as cold pressed and hot pressed, I personally prefer cold press. I would recommend that for anybody who's beginning. And these three that I have here are cotton paper. Before I show you these, I want to discuss this one. As far as cellulose paper, in my opinion, this is probably the best and very affordable as well. So it's a win-win in my case. I started out with Canson XL and I still use it to this day. I have tried many other brands. I always come back to this one. It's also available pretty much everywhere. When it comes to cotton paper, it also depends on your budget, obviously. My recommendation would be to start off with bee paper if you're on a budget. You're still going to have the advantage of cotton paper, and it's fairly good quality, and I buy it from Amazon for a very affordable price, and I do love that size, the 6x9. Also, the texture of the bee paper is quite smooth. You have like, you probably won't be able to tell, but it's a fine grain texture, I want to say. Now, if you do want to splurge, you can go for any of these two. There are many other ones again, but these are the ones that I have in my stash. Arches is my absolute favorite. That's just a preference, and again, I always use cold press. Fabriano is also another brand that tends to be a little bit pricey, but the advantage of this Artistico line is that it comes in smaller sizes, so you can still find them at a decent price. Obviously a little bit more expensive than this, that's for sure. And when you buy a pad like this, it usually comes glued on 4 sides with just a little opening to start you off when you want to take the paper apart. The intention behind this is to minimize buckling. Again, keep in mind that watercolor paper will buckle no matter what, unless you stretch your paper like the real professionals do, and for me that is too time consuming and I don't do that. I do kind of like a stretching a little bit when I use my glass cutting board. Sometimes I will spray the back just to minimize buckling, especially when I do a painting that I know I will use a lot of water on, but I don't do that all the time. So again, these more expensive, this one affordable, therefore a super good paper to start off with, and it's 100% cotton. And I'm not sponsored. In terms of brushes, what will drive the price is obviously the bristles, and you have bristles that are made of synthetic fibers, and you have bristles that are made of animal hairs. And I just want to mention here that I'm not going to go into the ethical debate whether you should paint with animal hair or not. That is not my place to debate. It's just a question of choice, and that is very personal. Having said this, I have an array here of brushes that I think would be considered a good starting point. I have a flat brush here that's a 3/4 inch by Princeton Neptune. I have 3 sizes of round brushes. This is a number 10 by Caviar Dynasty. I have here a number 6 round by Silver Black Velvet and a number 2 by Princeton Neptune. And I also have a small one for detailing, especially if you are wanting to doodle with a paintbrush. That would be fun to have in your arsenal. This one is a Princeton Select Petite, and I like the short handle as well. This one, I would say, if I had to remove one brush, I would remove this one, but in my opinion, that is a good and very affordable investment. First of all, a flat brush. You can do a nice wash over your paper with clean water, or if you want to create a gradient, I would recommend a flat brush. And also, I use it a lot when I do floral paintings, especially if I want to do like a loose floral painting or even a cityscape. This brush is very versatile, and I use it quite often, and I highly recommend it. This is a number 10, a number 6, and number 2. Now, unfortunately, there's not a universal numbering system throughout the brands. They're not consistent. However, if you are looking at a number 10, for instance, in the Caviar by Dynasty, chances are it's quite similar to the Silver Black Velvet or to the Princeton Neptune, but keep in mind there might be slight differences. Here I have kind of like 3 different size tips, because a round brush will always kind of like taper at the end, and I'm gonna wet them so that you can see the difference. Now, sometimes I like to have a very sharp point, and sometimes I like to have a more round point, depending on what I'm painting. So I'm just gonna wet all three of them and just reshape the bristles. All right, so as you can see, the Caviar Dynasty tends to have a little bit of a rounded tip, and I would say the ones that are the pointiest are the black silver right here, the middle one, the silver black velvet, sorry. You can see how thin of a tip it is, and the in-between one I would say is Princeton Neptune. So this is how I rate my brushes: round tip, very pointy, and in the middle. Now, the reason why sometimes I don't want to have something super pointy is that I want to dot sometimes, especially with gold, and so I would prefer something that has a more of a rounded tip at the end. And of course, if I'm filling in a shape and it's there's a lot of angles, I would use something that is pointed like this. Now, all these hold a lot of liquid, and they're a dream to paint with. Now, there are also other more affordable solutions. For instance, I have quite a few brushes by Simply Simmons. The spring back is quite dramatic. These are made of synthetic bristles, and there's nothing wrong with that brush, except that you will find that you will have to reload your brush quite often because it does not hold a lot of water, not as much as these. It's okay if you are filling in a small area, but if you're doing a larger area, sometimes dipping the brush often can make a big difference in your work, especially if your paper is absorbing the paint quite quickly. Then you will find yourself creating those hard edges. So I don't use these brushes often. I would reserve these for myself anyways, for gouache, because gouache is a little bit more thick. Finally, the Princeton Petite. This size, I forgot to mention, is a 20/0, extremely thin. And I do get a lot of questions about this gizmo. It's not a brush holder, it's actually a soap holder. When I am done painting, I usually rinse my brushes pretty well, and I always reshape the brushes. Even the flat ones, I will remove the excess water and then I'll just reshape it. It just helps keeping your brushes in good condition. The question that keeps coming back all the time is about paints. What's a good starter kit? What brand do you recommend? And all that. In terms of brands, I can tell you that I have all kinds. I am not a brand person per se. What I look for in a paint is the quality. And even if you're starting out and you're on a limited budget, what I would recommend is to have fewer colors, but the best quality. Now, if you have been following me for a while, you know I have a lot of watercolor paints, and I'm not ashamed to show you because a lot of them were given to me as gifts, and also I have been watercoloring for a long time. I wanted to show you this, however, to tell you that you do not need all of these to create. In fact, most professional watercolorists will say it's better to have these and mix your own colors, just because it tends to create a more harmonious painting, and I do agree. And it's also a very good way to learn about colors. I'm not going to talk about color theory here, I'm just going to give you a little bit of information, but I would say that a good friend is to have a little color chart, like a color wheel like this, especially one that, mine is in French, one that will show you what colors you can create if you add another color or if you add white or black. So this is a very good tool to have. Also, you can take classes online that will talk about color theory. A lot of good artists out there have put out classes on the topic, so you can follow those if you want to learn more about color theory. Now, I wanted to show you also that with this limited palette, I was able to create every single color under the rainbow. And all I have are 6 primary colors, 3 cools and 3 warms, and a couple of neutrals. And this is what I was able to create. Now these are at their highest pigmented, and if you start diluting them, of course you're going to get a little bit more of a washed out effect, and anywhere in between. And I'm not going to show you how to make this because there are tons of videos on YouTube that you can find on that topic. You just have to Google watercolor color chart or watercolor color swatch or mixing chart, and you will find quite a few good ones out there. And if you don't have a case, that's fine too. You can use regular dish. This is a porcelain plate, and so I decided to use it as a palette. As long as it's white, you're good to go. I found similar ones at the dollar store. They don't have to be square either. Just a regular white plate will do. Okay, so in terms of colors, here's what I've chosen. I have 3 cool primaries and 3 warm primaries, a few neutrals, and those metallics and the whites, in my opinion, are not essential, but they are essential to me. And again, this is my preference, my choice of colors. It varies from people to people. The one thing that I would recommend is that you choose artist grade. Depending on your budget, it will dictate how many tubes of paint you can buy or how many pans of paints you can buy, but I would shy away from especially student grade. Craft grade, there's a few out there that are pretty good, but again, there's more filler and less pigment in their paint, and the payload will not be the same, definitely, especially if you're going to mix them together. And in terms of brands, I have all kinds. Okay, so in terms of the names of the colors, I have Azo Yellow by M. Graham, Quinacridone Red by Daniel Smith, Prussian Blue by Sennelier. So these are my 3 warm primary colors. And for cold, I'm sorry. And for the warm, I have Indian Yellow by M. Graham, Bright Red by Daniel Smith, and Ultramarine Blue by M. Graham as well. And for the neutrals, I've chosen Sepia by Renaissance, Payne's Gray also by Renaissance, and Ivory Black by Renaissance. So these are the 3 Renaissance colors. And then I have Transparent Red Oxide by Daniel Smith. And if I want to show you very quickly the other ones, I have Titanium White, just because it is, this one is by Renaissance, and it's the most opaque white that I found without going into gouache. And I do like to do some overpainting or dotting with white sometimes. I don't usually mix white with my colors, just because white has by nature a lot of filler and it will dull down your paint color. If you want a lighter version of whatever you've mixed, just add more water and you will get something lighter. In terms of the metallics, I have my friend Patty's Rose Gold. Again, I will link that below where you can get that. And I also have 2 gold colors by Creamer. My absolute favorite is the Pale Gold, which is the one that I use all the time. And I also have Star Gold. Sometimes I do want to have a little bit more of a yellow gold. But again, this is my preference. You don't have to have those to start off with. Another tip I can give you is to make sure that when you do your chart, I like to keep a chart in my palette. Again, that's just a preference. It's not necessary. If you only have a few colors, you will know eventually, especially if you use them often. But I do like to keep a chart, and when I do my chart, obviously the marker that I use is waterproof for sure, but I also put a very thick line of India ink, then paint over it so that I can tell whether a paint is transparent or opaque just by how it reacts over the black line. Before I let you go, I'm just going to show you how I would mix my colors. I always start by re-wetting my paints. I'm going to grab my brush, and let's say I want to do an orange one. Obviously, most people know that yellow and red will make an orange. So I will grab my yellow and put some here, and then I would remove the yellow from my brush, rinse in my water glass, and then I will pick up Aquin Red, and then I will slowly, sometimes I even remove the excess red that I have there, and I will slowly bring in the red into the yellow. And you can see that sometimes it doesn't take a long time to get a nice orange. If I want a more yellow tinted orange, I can just keep on adding yellow into the mix until I get the color that I want. Add a little bit more yellow. So you can see that you can get a good range. I would even add a little bit more and get almost like an Indian yellow. And then if I want to have a lighter orange, then I would just add more water, and that would give me a lighter color. Now if I want to dull down that paint, I would add maybe a little bit of sepia maybe, or even Payne's Gray. And you're going to see how dull that color is going to become. Almost creates like a neutral, almost like a raw umber, I want to say. And you can do this with any of the colors in there. For instance, if I were to mix yellow with blue, I would obviously create a green. And depending on how much yellow or how much blue I add, of course I would create a different value of that color. And look how vibrant that green is. This reminds me of green gold, which when I bought watercolor the first time, the first color that I ever bought in any of the mediums that I've ever started is green gold. And then if I add water to this, you can see that I can take it down to quite a lighter shade. Same thing with black. You can add a little bit of black to this and you will get a very, very dark green. Almost like a bottle green. I think out of these colors, my favorite color to mix are ultramarine with red. I'm going to take Quin Red. Look at this. Oh, look at this purple. How gorgeous is that? I could even take maybe the Prussian blue, which is a cold blue. Oops, sorry, I'm off frame. And add Quin Red and get like, add a little bit more red. I get more of a plum color. Not plum, burgundy, or wine color. So without having to buy a tube of orange paint, you can create your own orange and have fun with all the other colors. Look at these bright colors that I was able to mix with just these 6. So this one here was made with my previous choice of colors for the Cool palette. I think this was Opera Pink and this one was Manganese Blue. And I did not like the way they mixed together. So I removed those as my Cool primaries and I've replaced them with what I have. But look at these colors, how vibrant they are. So I hope this has answered some of your questions. Again, my recommendation is to start slow, buy little but better quality, and you won't regret it. That way you will maximize your watercolor experience. As usual, I will leave a lot of information in the description below. I want to say a huge thank you to my awesome patrons for providing support over at my Patreon page. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below, and I will see you soon.